Days before my birthday, I knew my sister would make something up to make my parents cancel the event. It had become a pattern I couldn't ignore anymore. So when they left for her again, I left for good. I'm walking through the front door after an 8-hour shift at the hardware store, holding a chocolate cake I bought myself from the grocery store bakery. Cost me $6. Had happy birthday written in blue frosting that was already smearing from the heat. It wasn't much, but it was mine. My parents, Patricia and Dennis, were sitting in the living room with my sister Haley like some kind of intervention setup. The second I walked in, my mom looked up with this expression. Not quite pity, more like practiced disappointment, and delivered the news. Blake, we've decided there won't be any birthday celebration this year. Haley's been feeling overshadowed lately and needs the family's full attention right now. You understand? Not a question. A statement. Like my feelings on the matter were irrelevant background noise. Haley sat on the worn leather couch looking appropriately distressed, fake tears already forming in her eyes. That's when something clicked in my brain. This wasn't just another instance of me being invisible in my own family. This was the final straw in a lifetime of being erased. I set the cake down on the coffee table without a word, walked straight to my room, and started packing everything I owned. The suffocating weight of that moment made perfect sense when I thought about the previous 20 years of my life. Let me back up and explain the family dynamic that created this disaster. Haley is 2 years younger than me. When she was 8, she won some junior beauty pageant, one of those small regional competitions that desperate parents convince themselves matter. I remember that day clearly because it was the last time my parents looked at me with genuine pride. Right before they handed Haley that cheap plastic trophy, everything changed. From that moment forward, every family event, every saved dollar, every ounce of parental attention got redirected toward Haley's endless pageants, dance classes, voice lessons, and acting coaches. The house transformed into a shrine to her mediocre talents. My straight-A report cards got brief nods, while Haley's participation ribbons got framed and mounted on every available wall. When I got accepted to the state science fair with a project I'd spent months developing, my achievement vanished beneath the excitement of Haley's next competition. I learned to celebrate my victories alone in my room while the living room became Haley's personal stage. Dad started working overtime at the factory to pay for Haley's expensive competition dresses and travel costs. He'd come home looking destroyed, eat dinner in silence, then sit through hours of Haley practicing her routines. I watched him age a decade in 3 years. His shoulders permanently slumped from the weight of financial pressure and emotional exhaustion. The only person who saw through this madness was my grandfather Walter, Dad's arranged father, who lived across town. The family rarely talked about Walter because he and Mom had some ancient feud about him not supporting Haley's pageant dreams financially. Smart man. But Walter would secretly meet me at the library or park bringing sandwiches and actually listening when I talked about school, my part-time job at the hardware store, my college plans. He was the one who celebrated when I got accepted to state college with a partial scholarship. He even opened a small college fund for me without telling anyone, making deposits whenever he could. What made that birthday night even worse was what I'd overheard 3 hours earlier. I'd come home early from my shift and heard Haley on the phone in her room. Her door was cracked open, and her voice had that fake sweetness she used when spinning lies to her friends. "Yeah, I already told Mom that I need extra attention right now," Haley said, giggling. "I mean, Blake's birthday is tomorrow, but who cares? I told them I've been feeling really depressed and overlooked. Mom bought it completely. She's going to tell him tonight that we're not celebrating because I need family support." I stood frozen in the hallway as she continued. "The best part is that nobody knows I flunked out of college 3 weeks ago. That dismissal letter from the registrar is going to arrive any day now. But by then, I'll have convinced them that I dropped out because I was too stressed from the family focusing on Blake instead of me. Can you believe he still lives here at 23? What a loser." She laughed, that cruel little sound I'd heard 1,000 times before. "I already have Mom convinced that we need to spend Blake's birthday talking about my feelings and my future. By the time that letter arrives, they'll be so worried about my mental health that they won't even care about the $40,000 they wasted on my tuition." $40,000. They told me they couldn't help with my college expenses because money was tight, but they'd spent $40,000 on Haley's education that she'd just thrown away. I felt something break inside me in that moment, something that had been cracking for years, finally shattered completely. So when I walked in 3 hours later with that pathetic store-bought cake and saw them all sitting there ready to cancel my birthday for Haley's manufactured crisis, I knew exactly what was happening. Haley had orchestrated this whole thing to deflect from her academic failure. She was using my birthday as a distraction, turning herself into the victim before the truth could come out. Mom sat forward on the couch, hands folded in that practiced way she had when delivering what she thought was motherly wisdom. Blake, you need to understand that Haley is going through a very difficult time right now. She's been feeling like the family doesn't appreciate her enough, and we need to show her that she's our priority. Your birthday happens every year, but Haley's emotional well-being is fragile. We need to come together as a family and support her. That means no celebration, no cake, no presents. We're going to spend the evening talking about Haley's feelings and how we can better support her dreams. I looked at Dad, hoping for some sign of resistance, some flicker of awareness that this was wrong. But Dennis just stared at his hands, defeated as always. He'd given up fighting years ago, choosing survival over confrontation. Haley finally spoke, her voice trembling with fake emotion. I'm sorry, Blake. I know this is hard for you, but I just feel so invisible sometimes, like nobody sees how much I'm struggling. I need to know that this family cares about me, that I'm not just forgotten. Forgotten. She actually said that word. The girl whose face covered every wall, whose trophies filled every shelf, whose needs determined every family decision. She felt forgotten. Meanwhile, I'd been sleeping in the same tiny bedroom since I was 5, because Haley needed the bigger room for her pageant costumes. I'd been wearing the same 3 pairs of jeans for 2 years because Haley needed new outfits for Instagram photos. I'd been forgotten so thoroughly that most extended family members couldn't even remember what I was studying in college. That's when I made my decision. No announcement, no dramatic confrontation, no begging for recognition. I simply set that sad little cake on the coffee table, looked at each of them one last time, and walked to my room. They probably thought I was going to sulk like I had so many times before. They had no idea I was about to disappear from their lives completely. I moved through my room with the efficiency of someone who'd been planning this escape subconsciously for years. Every drawer got emptied, every important document gathered, every piece of clothing I actually cared about folded into 2 large duffel bags and a backpack. The room looked strange as I packed, like it was finally revealing what it had always been, a temporary stop rather than a home. My entire life fit into 3 bags. That's what 23 years in this house amounted to. 3 bags and a college acceptance letter. I heard footsteps in the hallway around midnight. Dad knocked softly on my door. Blake, can I come in? I opened the door. He stood there looking older than his 48 years, shoulders hunched, eyes tired. For a moment, I thought maybe he'd come to his senses. Maybe he was finally going to stand up for me. Instead, he pulled out his wallet and handed me 5 crumpled $100 bills. This is all I have right now, he said quietly. I know things aren't fair. I know we failed you, but I don't know how to fix it anymore. Your mother, Haley. I just don't have any fight left. I took the money, not because I thought it made things right, but because I knew I'd need it. $500 was more than he'd ever given me for anything. The fact that it came with an apology for my entire childhood somehow made it worse. Thanks, I said flatly. Where will you go? Does it matter? He looked like I'd slapped him, but he didn't argue, just nodded and walked away. Shoulders somehow more slumped than before. I left at 2 a.m. while everyone was asleep. Threw my bags in my beat-up Honda Civic that had 187,000 miles on it, and drove to the one place I knew I'd be welcome. Grandpa Walter's small house across town. Walter opened the door in his bathrobe, took one look at my bags and my face, and just stepped aside to let me in without questions. That's the thing about Walter. He didn't need explanations. He understood instantly. Birthday went well, I take it, he said dryly, heading to the kitchen to make hot chocolate. I told him everything. The conversation I'd overheard, the canceled celebration, the $500 from Dad. Walter listened without interrupting, his weathered hands wrapped around his mug jaw, working like he was physically restraining himself from saying what he really thought. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. You can stay here as long as you need, he finally said. The spare room's yours. No rent, no conditions. Just promise me you'll finish college and make something of yourself. Best revenge is living well. I promised. That spare room became my launching pad. I worked full-time at the hardware store, went to classes, and spent every spare moment learning about real estate investment. Walter, it turned out, had dabbled in property renovation decades ago. He taught me everything he knew about finding undervalued properties, doing budget renovations, and maximizing rental income. The college fund he'd been secretly building for me turned out to be $8,000, enough to cover a year's tuition if I stayed local and kept working. I finished my degree in 3 years instead of 4 by taking summer classes and maxing out my credit hours each semester. Meanwhile, my family fell apart without me there to be the scapegoat. The dismissal letter from Haley's college arrived 2 weeks after I left. Mom called me 17 times that day. I didn't answer. She left voicemails that progressed from angry to desperate to guilt-tripping. Blake, your sister needs you right now. This is a family crisis. How can you abandon us like this? We need to present a united front. Call me back immediately. I deleted every message without listening to them fully. Through Walter, who maintained sparse contact with Dad, I learned what was happening. The $40,000 tuition bill was due. Haley's mental health crisis defense didn't hold up when the registrar explained she'd failed every single class from sheer lack of attendance. Mom was furious. Dad was resigned. Haley was playing victim harder than ever. Somehow making her academic failure about the family not supporting her emotional needs enough without me there, as the buffer, the responsible one who made everyone else's dysfunction look less bad by comparison. They had to actually look at each other. Apparently, they didn't like what they saw. I graduated college at 24 with a degree in business administration and exactly 0 family members in attendance. Walter came bringing a small cake and a card with a check for $1,000. Investment capital, he called it. Go make your first deal. That summer, I found a foreclosed property through a bank auction listing. 3-bedroom house in a decent neighborhood that had been sitting empty for 8 months. The grass was waist-high, the paint was peeling, and the interior looked like it had been abandoned mid-renovation by someone who'd run out of money and hope. Perfect. The bank was listing it at $52,000, but I could tell they were desperate. Properties in this condition scared off most buyers who wanted move-in-ready homes. I spent a week researching comparable sales, calculating repair costs, and building a detailed renovation budget. Offered $47,000, expecting them to counter. They accepted $45,000 within 24 hours. Used Walter's $1,000 investment, plus every penny I'd saved from 3 years of working at the hardware store as a down payment. Got a small business loan for the rest, with the property itself as collateral. The bank officer looked skeptical when I walked in with my renovation plans and budget spreadsheets, but the numbers were solid. He approved it. The next 6 months were brutal. I'd work my regular job during the day, then head to the property and work until midnight or later. Ripped out the disgusting carpet. Found beautiful oak hardwood underneath that just needed refinishing. Patched and painted every surface. Replaced outdated light fixtures with modern alternatives from the hardware store where I got my employee discount. Landscaped the yard myself. Spending weekends pulling weeds and planting shrubs. Learned plumbing by watching YouTube videos and calling in favors from contractors I'd met through the hardware store. Figured out basic electrical work the same way. Made mistakes, plenty of them, but learned from each one. The first faucet I installed leaked for 3 days before I figured out I'd forgotten a washer. The first light switch I wired was backwards. But by the end, I could handle most basic home repairs competently. Also learned about permits inspections and the million small details that separate amateur landlords from professional property managers. Discovered that the city required specific permits for certain electrical work. Found out that rental properties needed specific safety features like hardwired smoke detectors. Every regulation felt like an obstacle designed to stop people like me. But I treated each one as a lesson in how to do things right. When I finished, the place looked completely transformed. Fresh paint, updated fixtures, refinished floors, landscaped yard had it professionally appraised, and it came back at $89,000. I'd essentially created $44,000 in equity through 6 months of sweat and about $15,000 in materials and permits. Listed it for rent at $1,200 per month. Got 14 applications in the first week. Selected a young couple, both teachers, stable income, excellent references. No red flags. The rent covered my mortgage payment, property taxes, insurance, and maintenance fund with about $200 left over each month. That surplus went straight into savings for the next property. But more importantly, I'd proved I could do this. That first property wasn't just about money. It was about demonstrating that I could take something broken and make it valuable. That I could build something real with my own hands and intelligence. The second property came 8 months later. Another foreclosure, this one a duplex. Same process. Research, calculate, renovate, rent. This time, the work went faster because I knew what I was doing. By the end of that renovation, I could tile a bathroom, install a toilet wire, a ceiling fan, and patch drywall better than half the contractors I'd met. Third property was a small single-family home that needed major work. The previous owner had started gutting the kitchen, then apparently just gave up. I spent 3 months finishing what they'd started, learning cabinet installation and countertop work along the way. Each property taught me something new. Each renovation made me more competent. Each successful rental proved I could do this professionally. By 26, I owned 3 rental properties. By 28, I had 7. By 30, I was running a small real estate investment company with 15 properties generating consistent monthly income. I'd built something real from nothing using the same stubbornness my family used to hate about me. During those years, my family made sporadic attempts to contact me. Mom would call on holidays, leaving messages about healing family wounds and letting go of past hurt. Haley found me on social media, sending messages about how much she'd grown and how sorry she was. I ignored all of it. Not out of spite exactly, but because I genuinely had nothing to say to them. They belonged to a life I'd left behind. I'd moved so far past that version of myself that engaging with them felt like trying to have a conversation with strangers about someone else's problems. Then Walter got sick. Cancer stage 3 when they found it. He was 72 and stubborn as hell, insisting on minimal treatment so he could die on his own terms instead of wasting away in some hospital. I moved back into his house to take care of him during those final months. That's when my family made their move. Mom showed up at Walter's house one afternoon while I was at work. She'd found out through some distant cousin that Walter was dying. Probably figured this was her chance to reconnect while I was vulnerable. Walter, bless him, met her at the door and didn't let her inside. "Patricia," he said coldly, "you got some nerve showing up here after what you did to that boy." "I'm his mother," she replied, trying to sound hurt. "I have a right to see my son. You gave up that right when you chose your daughter's fantasy over your son's reality. Blake doesn't want to see you. Now get off my property before I call the police." She left, but not before leaving a letter. Walter gave it to me that evening. I almost threw it away unread, but something made me open it. The letter was a masterpiece of manipulation. 3 pages of how she'd always loved both children equally. How she'd been doing her best in difficult circumstances. How Haley had really changed and was now working hard to become independent. No actual apology, just explanations and justifications wrapped in victim language. The kicker was the last paragraph. "We're having financial difficulties right now. Your father's overtime got cut, and Haley's been struggling to find stable employment. We could really use your help. I know you've been doing well in real estate. Maybe you could give us some advice or help with a loan. Family helps family, Blake. That's what we do." There it was. The real reason for the sudden interest in reconciliation. They needed money. I showed the letter to Walter. He read it, then handed it back with a disgusted shake of his head. "They haven't changed at all," he said. "Still using people. Still refusing to take responsibility. Still expecting you to fix their problems." "I know. What are you going to do?" "Nothing." I said absolutely nothing. Walter smiled. "That's my boy. He passed away 3 weeks later, peacefully in his sleep. Left me everything. The house, his savings, his old truck. The will included a note. Blake, you were the grandson I was proud to claim, and the son my boy never learned to be. Use this foundation to build something beautiful. Don't let them pull you back down." The funeral was small. Me, a few of Walter's old friends. Dad, Mom, and Haley didn't come. They weren't invited. Dad looked terrible. Older than ever, hollow-eyed. He approached me after the service. "I'm sorry," he said, "about everything. About being too weak to stand up to your mother, about letting Haley manipulate all of us, about not being the father you deserved." I studied him for a long moment. The anger I'd expected to feel wasn't there. Just a sort of detached pity for this man who'd wasted years of his life enabling dysfunction. "You can't fix the past, Dennis," I told him, "but you can stop repeating it in the future." "I'm getting divorced," he said suddenly. "Filed papers last week. I should have done it years ago, but I kept thinking things would get better. They never did." "Good," I said. "Maybe now you can figure out who you actually are instead of who Patricia wanted you to be." We didn't hug or have some tearful reconciliation, just nodded at each other like business acquaintances and went our separate ways. But something had shifted. Dad was finally making a choice instead of just accepting whatever happened to him. Inheriting Walter's house gave me the capital I needed to expand the business. I sold the property for $180,000 and used the proceeds to buy a small apartment complex, 8 units that needed significant work but had solid bones. Spent a year renovating, then filled them with quality tenants at market rates. The business grew. By 32, I was managing 43 properties across 3 counties. By 35, I'd expanded into commercial real estate, small office buildings, retail strips, even a small warehouse complex. Each acquisition was carefully researched, conservatively financed, and managed with the same attention to detail I'd learned from that first foreclosure. The key was treating tenants like people instead of revenue sources. I responded to maintenance requests within 24 hours, kept properties in excellent condition, charged fair market rates instead of squeezing every possible dollar, built a reputation as a landlord people actually wanted to rent from. Word spread. My vacancy rates were consistently below 5% when the market average was 12 to 15%. I also started mentoring other young investors, people who reminded me of myself at 24, hungry, determined, but without the knowledge or connections to get started. I'd meet them for coffee review, their business plans sometimes even partner with them on their first deals. Watching someone succeed using the principles Walter taught me felt like honoring his legacy in the most meaningful way possible. The investment company itself became profitable beyond just rental income. I'd find distressed properties, renovate them efficiently, then either hold them for rental income or sell them to other investors at market rates. The company developed a reputation for taking on challenging projects that others avoided. Weird layouts, code violations, difficult locations. I'd figured out that problems others saw as deal breakers were actually opportunities if you knew how to solve them systematically. Revenue hit 7 figures annually when I was 33. Not bad for someone who'd left home at 23 with $500 in a duffel bag. Somewhere along the way, I'd become legitimately wealthy. Not private jet rich, but comfortable in a way my parents never were, despite their constant striving to appear successful. The difference was, I'd built something real, while they'd been maintaining appearances on credit cards and overtime. I also met Natalie. She was a real estate attorney handling the closing on one of my commercial properties, a small office building I was converting to mixed-use retail space. The previous owner had gotten tangled up in code violations and was selling at a loss just to escape the headache. I saw potential where they saw problems. Natalie walked into our first meeting wearing a sharp suit and carrying a briefcase that looked like it weighed more than she did. She was direct, efficient, with exactly zero patience for nonsense. Within 5 minutes, she'd identified 3 potential issues with the title that the previous attorney had missed. Within 10 minutes, she'd outlined solutions for all 3. "You actually read this whole contract," I said, impressed. "Most attorneys just skimmed the standard stuff." "That's literally my job," she replied without looking up from her notes. "You'd be surprised how many people pay me to do things they could do themselves if they just read the documents." We ended up grabbing coffee after the closing. She suggested it said she liked working with investors who actually understood what they were buying instead of just chasing money. We talked for 2 hours about real estate market trends and property law. She'd grown up in a trailer park, put herself through law school working 3 jobs, and had exactly zero patience for people who made excuses instead of making progress. My mom always said I should find a nice, stable man to take care of me. Natalie mentioned during one of our early dates. She meant it as advice. I took it as a warning about what not to do. We clicked immediately. 2 people who'd both built themselves from nothing and understood that success wasn't about proving anything to anyone. It was about building something real that couldn't be taken away. She also understood family dysfunction in ways most people couldn't. Her father had been an addict who drained the family savings multiple times before disappearing when she was 12. Her mother had spent years making excuses for him choosing loyalty to a destructive man over protection of her kids. Natalie had learned early, same as me, that sometimes the people who are supposed to love you are actually the ones holding you back. "You know what I love about real estate?" she said one evening while reviewing contracts at my kitchen table. "Buildings don't lie. They don't manipulate. They don't make excuses. Either the foundation is solid or it isn't. Either the structure is sound or it isn't. Everything is measurable, fixable, improvable." Wish people worked the same way. We dated for a year before I proposed. Nothing fancy. Just the 2 of us at the first property I'd ever renovated. Standing in the living room where I'd spent 6 months learning how to build something from broken pieces. I told her that was exactly what she'd helped me do with my life. Take someone broken and help them become whole without trying to change who they fundamentally were. She said yes before I finished the question. We got married 2 years later at a small venue that held exactly 50 people. Small ceremony, close friends, only no family drama, no performance, no pretense. Just 2 people who understood each other committing to building something together. Dad came, which surprised me. He'd fully divorced Patricia by then and was dating someone named Claire who actually treated him like an equal. He looked healthier than I'd seen him in years, like decades of weight had been lifted off his shoulders. "I'm proud of you," he told me at the reception. "Walter would be too." "Thanks." "I know I don't deserve forgiveness," he continued, "but I want you to know I'm trying to be better to do better." I can see that I said and I meant it. Around this time, I got an unexpected message on social media from Haley. Unlike the previous attempts at contact, this one was different. No excuses, no manipulation, just a straightforward message. "Blake, I know I don't deserve a response, but I wanted you to know I've been working on myself. Got a job at a restaurant, been there 2 years now. Started as a hostess, worked up to shift manager. It's not glamorous, but it's honest work and I'm proud of it. I'm sorry for everything. You don't have to forgive me or even respond. I just needed you to know that I finally understand what you've known all along. That real worth comes from what you build, not what you're given." I didn't respond immediately. Showed it to Natalie, who read it carefully. "What do you think?" she asked. "I think people can change," I said. "But I also think time will tell if it's real or just another performance." Fair. 6 months later, Haley messaged again, this time with photos of her working at the restaurant, a simple apartment she'd rented on her own, a small savings account she'd built up. No requests, no manipulation, just evidence of a life she was building without anyone's help. I responded with a single line. "Proud of you for doing the work." Her reply came hours later. "Thank you. That means more than you know." We didn't become close, didn't have tearful reunions or pretend the past didn't matter, but we established a distant respect. Two people who shared DNA and trauma, acknowledging each other's existence without demanding anything. As for Mom, I heard through the family grapevine that she was living in a small apartment after the divorce, working as a receptionist, still telling anyone who'd listen about her ungrateful children who'd abandoned her. The irony wasn't lost on anyone that she'd ended up doing the same type of work Haley had started with, except Haley had used it as a foundation to grow, while Patricia used it as proof of victimhood. Last year, I decided to honor Walter's memory by opening a community center in the neighborhood where he'd lived his entire adult life. The building was a former warehouse that had been sitting empty for 3 years. Owner had died. Heirs couldn't agree on what to do with it. Eventually sold it just to stop paying taxes on vacant property. I bought it for $180,000, then spent another $400,000 on renovations. The space was massive, 12,000 square feet of potential. We gutted it completely, bringing it up to modern building codes while preserving the original exposed brick and timber beams that gave it character. Created a computer lab with 20 workstations running current software. Built 4 private tutoring rooms where kids could get one-on-one help with homework. Designed a large multi-purpose room that could host everything from job training workshops to community meetings. Added a commercial kitchen and small restaurant space where people could get affordable meals. Nothing fancy, just good food at prices that wouldn't break someone's budget. The restaurant was Natalie's idea. She'd pointed out that lots of families in that neighborhood were food insecure, but free meals came with stigma. Charging $1 for a plate of food lets people maintain dignity while still getting help. Smart woman. My wife spent 8 months on the renovation, managing contractors and doing much of the work myself when I could. The building transformed from an abandoned eyesore into something the neighborhood could be proud of. Named it the Walter Foundation. After the man who taught me that success meant building ladders for others to climb, not pulling them up behind you. At the grand opening ceremony, over 200 people showed up, local families, business owners, city council members who'd helped fast-track our permits. The computer lab was already booked solid for the next month. 3 local teachers had volunteered to run free tutoring sessions. The restaurant had applications from 5 people wanting to work there, all from the neighborhood. Dad came with Claire. Haley came with her boyfriend and their baby son, Owen. She'd named him after Walter's middle name. Natalie's family filled the room. Friends from over the years, business associates, people from the neighborhood who'd watched the renovation happen. I stood at the front of the room, looking out at faces that actually cared, and realized something profound. I'd built this. Not just the building, not just the business, not just the wealth. I'd built a life surrounded by people who chose to be there, who showed up, who gave without expecting anything back. During my speech, I talked about Walter and what he taught me about resilience, self-respect, and the difference between family you're born into and family you choose. Walter once told me that the best revenge isn't proving people wrong. I said, it's proving yourself right. He showed me that when people try to make you small, you don't shrink to fit their expectations. You grow until you outgrow them completely. The room was silent. People actually listening. Some people will try to dim your light because it makes their darkness visible. They'll try to convince you that you're nothing, because your something threatens their everything. But when you choose yourself, when you refuse to shrink for someone else's comfort, you don't just save yourself. You show others that they can choose themselves too. I looked at Dad, who had tears in his eyes, at Haley, who was holding Owen and nodding at Natalie, who understood better than anyone what it took to build something real from broken pieces. Walter chose to reach out to an invisible kid. Dennis chose divorce over continuing the lie. Haley chose work over manipulation. And I chose to leave a house that was never a home to build something real. That's what this foundation represents. The idea that it's never too late to choose differently. The applause filled the room, but I wasn't quite finished. I want to end with this, I said. The real gift Patricia gave me without meaning to was showing me exactly what not to be. By denying me birthday celebrations, she taught me to celebrate myself every day. By telling me I was nothing, she motivated me to become something. By erasing me from family photos, she freed me to paint my own portrait. Dad stood up, something he never would have done years ago. "That's my son," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. "That's my boy in every way that matters." The party continued late into the night. Haley left early to put Owen to bed, but not before hugging me. A real hug, without agenda or manipulation. "Thank you," she whispered, for showing me it was possible to change. "You did that yourself," I told her. "I just stopped enabling the alternative." Dad stayed until the end, helping clean up like a volunteer rather than expecting to be served. As we stacked chairs together, he said something that stayed with me. "I wasted 20 years being afraid of your mother's anger, afraid of making waves, afraid of standing up for what was right. The funny part is, once I finally did it, I realized the only thing I should have been afraid of was wasting more time being afraid." "Better late than never," I said. Still, he replied, looking at the empty room that would soon be filled with kids learning and growing. "I'm sorry I wasn't brave enough when it counted, when you needed me to be." "We can't change the past," I told him, "but you're here now. That counts for something." As Natalie and I locked up that night, she took my hand and said something I'll never forget. "You know what the best revenge really is? It's not success or money or even happiness. It's indifference. Patricia is out there somewhere, still angry, still bitter, still blaming everyone else. But you've moved so far past her that she's not even a footnote in your story anymore. She's just a catalyst that started a reaction she couldn't control." She was right. I rarely thought about Patricia anymore. When I did, it was with the kind of detached curiosity you might have about a stranger's problems. Her hold over me had dissolved completely, replaced by the solid foundation of real relationships and earned success. Looking back now, getting banned from my own birthday was the greatest gift my toxic family ever gave me. It forced me to stop waiting for them to celebrate my existence and start celebrating it myself. It taught me that you can't earn love from people who see your success as their failure. And most importantly, it showed me that sometimes the best way to honor where you came from is to become everything they tried to prevent you from being. I'm 37 now. Natalie and I have 2 kids who are growing up in a house where birthdays are celebrated, achievements are recognized, and love isn't conditional on being better than someone else. Haley brings Owen over for Sunday dinners where he plays with his cousins and learns that family gatherings can be about joy rather than judgment. Dad is an active grandfather, the kind he never got to be before. He still apologizes sometimes for the lost years, but I tell him the same thing every time. We can't change the past, but we can choose the future. As for Patricia, I heard through distant relatives that she's still at that receptionist job, still telling anyone who will listen about her ungrateful children who abandoned her. The difference between her and Haley is stark. Haley chose growth, while Patricia chose victimhood.